Little song. That was, I guess, a little promotional ability, but I will tell you he was something special. I'd like to hear the rest of the song. I don't know why they cut it off so short. They have no promotional ability, that's why. Growing up from humble beginnings in Mississippi, Elvis lived from 1935 to 1977 and first rose to fame with the 1954 single, That's All Right, recorded at the fabled Sun Studios in Memphis, Tennessee. Great place. He soon skyrocketed to international stardom, recording over 3 decades of unforgettable hits, from Heartbreak Hotel to Suspicious Minds to Burning Love. Elvis also won 3 Grammys for his gospel recordings, which were incredible, including his soaring live performance of How Great Thou Art. Just got to hear a little piece of it. Deeply patriotic, Elvis served in the United States military at the height of his fame. He had a choice, and to him it wasn't a choice. Presley starred in more than 30 films, and his 1973 television special, Elvis Aloha from Hawaii, was viewed by more than 1 billion people around the world, one of the highest ever in the history of television. After redefining music in the 50s and redefining cinema in the 60s, the King, as he was known by everybody to this day, they call him the King, revolutionized live performances in the 1970s. From the moment Elvis walked on the stage to the closing chords of Can't Help Falling in Love, crowds were enraptured by Elvis's electric performances and unbreakable bond with his fans. In fact, at the end of a performance, oftentimes the fans would go so wild. I was there once in Las Vegas at the Hilton. The fans were ripping the place apart, screaming. They were going crazy. And they announced, Elvis has left the house. Elvis, if they didn't say that, I think I'd still be there. Maybe I wouldn't be here. But they had to do that. Elvis has gone. Elvis has left. Today, we're glad to be joined by President and CEO of Elvis Presley Enterprises, Jack Sawden. Jack, thank you very much. I want to congratulate all of this year's recipients, family members, and loved ones. America is blessed to have the most skill, passion, and talent anywhere on earth. We are truly a great nation, and we're a nation that is doing really, really well right now. We have our greatest economy ever. We have our greatest employment numbers ever. We're doing well, and we're proud to be doing so well. And I'd like to now ask the military aide to come forward and read the citations for each recipient of the president.
To the Supreme Court. So a really great ceremony all around. We'll transition now back to some other news. Earlier today, President Trump had remarks from the Oval Office. He was addressing the special counsel's Russia investigation. The president says he has answered written questions from Robert Mueller, but has not submitted them yet. Take a listen to what he said.
My lawyers aren't working on that. I'm working on that. I write the answers. My lawyers don't write answers. I write answers. I was asked a series of questions. I've answered them very easily. Very easily. I'm sure they're tricked up. You have to always be careful when you answer questions with people that probably have bad intentions.
So there's a couple of things there. One, he's suggesting Bob Mueller has bad intentions, and that's been a theme of his. I don't know if there's too much evidence of that yet, but that's been a theme. But also, the president has really wanted Mueller to wrap up this investigation. He says it's meandered. It has gone adrift of what its original mission was. But Mueller's been waiting for these answers so that he can try to wrap up. If the president does finally send them, could we see an end in sight?
Oh, I guarantee you that Robert Mueller wants this to be concluded every bit as much, if not more so, than the president. And I don't think he's too worried about his reputation. He stands in very high esteem in both parties in Washington. He is probably the most revered lawman in the business today, and Democrats and Republicans alike, based on his track record at the FBI. So he's not worried about that part. What he is worried about, I am sure, is coming up with a conclusion that will be satisfactory. Now, he knows that anything short of declaring the president a traitor will be viewed by Democrats as insufficient. decision. But he also knows that the president is going to try to discredit anything that he finds, especially as it relates to members of his inner circle. And that becomes the testy point for Mueller. But if Mueller has these questions in hand, now we know the president's lawyers are a little concerned. Rudy Giuliani said he was worried that some of the questions were a perjury trap. And I think, well, if you're reading the answers and the president's answering honestly and you're reviewing them, how can it possibly be a perjury trap unless the president's lying to you? But once Mueller has those answers, once he's in business and can do that, then we can reach the terminal phase of this, and everybody, as everybody would like to, get on with this.
Right. After an election, a midterm, there's usually changes. President Trump talked about some of those possible changes today. Listen here.
I'm very happy with almost all of my cabinet. And, you know, changes are made because they're always made, especially after midterms.
Yeah, in 2 years for a cabinet member, sometimes that feels like a good time to move on, especially because they're heading into a re-election for the president, and that gets pretty intense. And so there might be some changes, Chris.
Well, and also because the Republicans have expanded by 2 seats, probably, their Senate majority, they can leave in good conscience knowing that the president can nominate and confirm a replacement for them. If the Republicans had lost seats in the Senate, it would be a different matter altogether. But now if you've been wanting to get back to real life, if you've wanted to get away from the grind of this work, you can say, I put 2 years in, no one can say that I didn't, and move on knowing that the president's going to be able to, with a 3-seat majority instead of a 1-seat majority, be able to appoint people into those positions, and you can do so with a clean conscience.
Now, there's been some drama this morning with the Democrats figuring out who their leader is going to be. Pelosi trying to make a sale here. Take a listen to one of the Democratic members on this process.
There's nothing that Marsha could run for that I wouldn't support her because she's qualified. And I'm not anti-Pelosi, not at all. I consider the speaker to be a very talented speaker, a remarkable speaker. I consider her to be a friend, but I'm closer to Marsha. So if Marsha ran out, that's where I would be.
So earlier today, Nancy Pelosi and Marcia Fudge got together, and apparently Pelosi asked, what would it take to win your support? And Fudge said she's going to think about it over the holidays. How do you think she'll make her decision?
Man, you got to love the horse trading. You have to love this horse trading. However you feel about who's going to be in charge.
Actually.
However you feel about who's going to be in charge of the House. This is how government and politics works. Nancy Pelosi can only afford probably 17 defections. We'll see what the final count is. She can only afford 16, 17 defections. So if the CBC, if the Congressional Black Caucus says, actually, we're out, she has a huge problem. Now, whether they can actually make good on that promise, and what does Marcia Fudge want? Does she want something for the CBC as a whole? Does she want something for herself? Does she want something for a district? Does she want to vote on some measure? Pelosi and she could work all of that out and figure out what's it going to take to have you say, actually, on second thought, I really want to focus on the interests of the people of Cuyahoga County, and I'm going to go step aside from that work now. So all of that's happening behind closed doors on the Republican and Democratic side, especially on the Democratic side, is not only fascinating, but also will shape the conversations we're having next year, because this will help set the priorities for Democrats. As Pelosi has to make these deals to placate dissident members, those things will make it onto the legislative calendar next year.
Indeed. It's going to be interesting, and we won't know maybe for a little while how it's going to be, so you have to tune in every day to find out. Chris, thank you.
You bet.
An accidental disclosure revealing WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange could be facing secret federal charges. Chief intelligence correspondent Catherine Herridge is live in Washington. So, Catherine, I used to work at the Justice Department in the communications office. I got to hear your take on this. How did we find out that this was even happening?
Well, Dana, good afternoon. In this unrelated terrorism case filed in the Eastern District of Virginia on August 8th, that's where the disclosure was made. A counterterrorism researcher at George Washington University was first to stumble across 2 references to Julian Assange about the need to keep an indictment secret, what the court calls under seal. Quote, due to the sophistication of the defendant and the publicity surrounding the case, no other procedure is likely to keep confidential the fact that Assange has been charged. The proposed order would need to remain sealed until Assange is arrested. Assange remains at the Ecuadorian embassy in London, where he is unable to leave for fear of arrest or extradition. It's not clear what the charges may be that are under seal, but WikiLeaks has been under scrutiny since 2010 with the release of 750,000 classified State Department cables, and more recently the release of DNC and Clinton campaign emails during the 2016 election. After the election, of course, then CIA Director Mike Pompeo accused WikiLeaks of high crimes, including espionage.
WikiLeaks walks like a hostile intelligence service and talks like a hostile intelligence service. It has encouraged its followers to find jobs at the CIA in order to obtain intelligence. It's time to call out WikiLeaks for what it really is: a non-state hostile intelligence service, often abetted by state actors like Russia.
Assange's attorney said, "We have, quote, heard nothing from authorities suggesting that a criminal case against Mr. Assange is imminent. Prosecuting someone for publishing truthful information would set a terrible and dangerous precedent." Dana.
All right. Thank you so much, Catherine. We appreciate that.
You're welcome.
And President Trump says the economy is booming despite some criticism about tax reform. Congresswoman Liz Cheney, the new Republican conference chairwoman, she's going to be here next. How the economy will do with a divided Congress as the impact of tax cuts begins to wear off. President Trump earlier today sounding optimistic.
I'm extremely happy with our country. We're doing better on the economy. Maybe it's the best economy we've ever had. They may be the best unemployment numbers and employment numbers that we've ever had. There are more people working in the United States right now at this moment than have ever worked in the United States by far.
Joining me now is the newly elected leader of the House Republican Conference, Wyoming Congresswoman Liz Cheney. It's great to have you here. One of your new missions will be to try to help the Republicans take back the majority. And is the economy the way to do that?
Absolutely, Dana. It's absolutely clear. You know, you cannot argue with the results of President Trump's policies and frankly, of the things that we've accomplished in the 115th Congress in terms of the tax cuts. You know, for us in Wyoming, the regulatory reform and the cuts in regulation has been tremendous. So I think that the Democrats will clearly make an effort to stop that momentum, and people will realize that's not what they wanted when they cast their votes.
But does it concern you a little bit that in this past week, after the, I guess for 10 days since the midterm elections, that the message about the good economy was not one that could really punch through?
Well, I think that's really one of the things we've got to do as House Republicans is make sure that we're on offense, make sure that we're highlighting the disarray, frankly. You know, the Democrats have come into office and they've made a lot of promises, and they, are protesting against each other and each other's offices at this point. So we've got to make sure that we are, in fact, laying out for the American people the extent to which it's President Trump's policies, it's the policies and the legislation that we were able to pass that have really created the kind of economic growth this nation needs, and we'll need to get back to that.
I do want to ask you about sort of just the long-term aspect of this. The suburbia, for example, a lot of red suburbs, or had long been sort of red suburbs, acting more like blue suburbs, and then there is this gender gap, and Kevin McCarthy, who will be the majority leader for the Republicans, had this to say yesterday. Take a listen.
This is a challenge we had because a number of our women ran for higher office and moved out. And it was the year of the woman. If you look at every open seat the Democrats had.
Republican Party?
No, it wasn't much. We have room for improvement. But if you look at in the Democratic primaries where there was an open seat and it was a woman versus a man, a woman won 69% of the time. So, of course, they had more women coming forward. We can do better in recruitment.
So there's that recruitment side, but also just this stat. Democrats won 90% of House districts with the highest number of college-educated women, and that includes 15 in California alone. So from a messaging standpoint, which is what you'll be in charge of at the conference, how do you hope to turn that tide around?
Well, a couple of things, Dana. I think, first of all, it's very important for us to have as many women as we can. It's important to have a diverse conference. But bad policy coming out of the Democrats' diverse conference is still going to be bad policy. And at the end of the day, one of the things that our opponents tend to do is say, well, these are women's issues. These are the issues women care about. I can tell you as a mother of 5, I care deeply about national security. I care about economic growth. I care about jobs in this nation. I care about border security. And we as Republicans are never going to be in a situation where we are trying to segment women and say they only can be concerned about certain issues. At the end of the day, the policies that we have put forward, the policies that we defend and support, those are the ones that are going to create a better America for all Americans. Americans, men and women alike.
All right, Liz Cheney making Wyoming proud, home state hero
Dana,
there. All right,
too.
thank you, Liz Cheney.
Thank you.
Next, the Florida Senate race moving to a hand count. Phil Keating will have the latest live from Florida. Plus, will Congresswoman Marcia Fudge challenge Nancy Pelosi and run for Speaker of the House? One of her colleagues, Josh Gottheimer, joins me live to discuss. Exclusive one-on-one interview with President Trump. Here's a sneak peek.
A federal judge who you appointed has just ruled that you must give CNN reporter Jim Acosta his press pass back. Your reaction to the ruling?
It's fine. I mean, it's not a big deal. What they said, though, is that we have to create rules and regulations for conduct, et cetera, et cetera. We're doing that. We're going to write them up right now. It's not a big deal. And if he misbehaves, we'll throw him out. Or we'll stop the news conference.
What are your rules going to be? What is it that you're saying?
They're doing them now.
This is over the line, and you lose your press.
Yeah, they're doing them now. I mean, we'll have rules of decorum. You know, you can't keep asking questions. We had a lot of reporters in that room, many reporters in that room, and they were unable to ask questions because this guy gets up and starts, doing what he's supposed to be doing for him and for CNN, and just shouting out questions and making statements too. But I will say this: look. Nobody believes in the First Amendment more than I do. And if I think somebody's acting out of sorts, I will leave. I'll say, thank you very much, everybody. I appreciate you coming, and I'll leave. And those reporters will not be too friendly to whoever it is that's acting up.
And you can hear more from Chris when he appears on Shepard Smith reporting at the top of the hour, and catch Chris's full interview with the president this weekend on Fox News Sunday. I'm going to be setting my alarm for that one. Florida's two largest counties wrapping up hand recounts in the hotly contested Senate race. The effort now extending throughout the Sunshine State as a new Sunday deadline looms. Republican Rick Scott holding on to a slim lead over Democratic incumbent Bill Nelson. Phil Keating is live in Riviera Beach, Florida. Phil, Palm Beach County got off to a bit of a later start today.
Yeah, last night, the supervisor of elections here told us her staff was still trying to locate the remaining over and under ballots that had been set aside on election day before they could actually get started. So while Miami-Dade hand counting began last night, Broward early this morning, and actually Broward just now totally finished. Here in Palm Beach County, they actually began about 2 hours ago, just around noon. These are the 20 teams, each team with 2 people, of the hand counters who are now examining and assessing voter intent on all of these ballots. They will be here until just as long as it takes, but they don't have as nearly as many ballots to go through as well. So they're looking at the over and under ballots. That's where the counting machine rejected them because one or more races were left blank, or a voter picked more than one candidate to win. Republican Governor Rick Scott is ahead of Democratic incumbent Bill Nelson by 12,500 votes, well under the automatic trigger for this hand count. But his campaign again calls on Nelson to just end it and concede. In a statement, with the hand recount concluding in most counties across the state, showing no significant change in the margin, it's time for Bill Nelson to face reality and concede. In Palm Beach County, it's about 6,000 ballots now that are being examined. Miami-Dade had a lot more. It's the largest county. Broward had 31,000 of these ballots. They're done, like I said, just about within the past hour. Dana?
All right, Phil, thank you so much. Congresswoman Marcia Fudge will announce whether she is going to challenge Nancy Pelosi for the Speaker's gavel after Thanksgiving. The two Democrats met for about 45 minutes today after the Ohio lawmaker said she's considering running for House Speaker.
You said you decide after Thanksgiving. How soon should we expect to hear from you on your decision?
After Thanksgiving.
Well, that could be months after, weeks after.
No. It wouldn't be. I mean, literally after Thanksgiving.
Okay.
I'm joined now by Congressman Josh Gottheimer, a Democrat from New Jersey. Does Nancy Pelosi have your support?
I have said and been saying for months now, and a group of us have, that I'm going to support anybody who's willing to actually break the gridlock. And we've got a set of reforms that we've been working on, a group of us, called the Problem Solvers Caucus. And those reforms, which we call Break the Gridlock, are all about getting allowing for the floor to do what it should be doing on the House floor.
Because you're frustrated, right? You're no longer a freshman, but you're there and you're thinking, I ran for Congress, I want to do stuff, and the rules prevent me from getting anything done?
It favors extremists and doesn't allow people who have bipartisan ideas to get to the floor and bring those ideas up for a debate and a vote.
And so what did Pelosi say to your request?
So we met this week, and we'll meet with anybody who's interested in running for Speaker, and open to a lot of ideas. It was very constructive, and now we're waiting back for specific answers on which ones she'd be willing to adopt if she were Speaker.
At the end of the day, do you think Nancy Pelosi will be the Speaker?
I don't know. All I know is I know what I'm focused on, which is that I want to get these rules changes done so we can do business differently. The extremism's got to stop. We've got to be able to get things done.
Okay, so what are the things that you think you want to get done?
So an easy one that I think you can get bipartisan support around is infrastructure, right? I mean, this is one of those things when you talk to your colleagues, everyone says we've got to get this done. And I think if the administration's willing, that's a piece of legislation.
The president has been willing in the past. Do you think that remains?
Well, he's been willing, but then we've gotten pieces of legislation you can't bring it to the floor. We can't get pieces of legislation to the floor. So it's nice to talk about it, but now when the Democrats are in charge, I'm hoping one of the first things that we do is bring a piece of legislation to the floor on infrastructure.
But what about the new, very progressive liberal members who want to have votes on Medicare for all, or this new proposal on preventing taxes being raised by anyone in the 80% of? Did you see this thing today? Yes. Yeah, that's coming. You're going to probably have to vote on this too. I mean, there is some tension there with the extremists, or I don't know if you'd call them that, but the progressive side wanting things that maybe the rest of the Democratic caucus doesn't want.
I think the big lesson from this election is that the way we won, the Democrats, was through the middle. Right, and so now those were the seats we picked up.
You mean the ones that you flipped?
Yeah, the ones we flipped, not the ones that we traded. You know, we obviously had some Democrats replace other Democrats, but where we gained seats was through the middle, reasonable middle. You know, ones that people like me who are fiscally responsible and want to actually get things done. And that's where infrastructure makes a lot of sense. And you could really get Republicans and Democrats behind that. And as you said, the administration would get behind it.
Well, there's another one. I mean, we've talked about it this week. Senator Mike Lee was on talking about his bill in regards to prison reform or criminal justice reform.
Yes.
Is that something you think that could get done before the end of the year?
Yeah, in fact, the Problem Solvers Caucus, the bipartisan group I co-chair, one of the bills we got behind last year was about prison reform, and it passed the House. Now it's in the Senate.
And then what about going forward? I mean, I just remember heading into a re-election effort, an election year. Now there's divided government. Americans tend to like that, but that usually means that a lot can't get done. I know you want to change that, but do you think so? If President Trump were to put back on the table the immigration offer that he did, that he had last year, do you think the Democrats will do that, or will they be reluctant to give him a win?
There were about 5 offers. So I think if we got the bill to the floor that a group of us worked on, where there were enough votes, if we actually, going back to our idea why we're trying to change things, if we brought that package to the floor, it was a bipartisan bill, border security, and also help dreamers stay in our country. If that were brought to the floor in January, I bet that would pass. But the question is, are we going to be willing to do it? Are we willing to work together?
Yeah, are you?
You know, and you got a group of us who are willing and ready.
And do you think that there are new Republicans who have just been elected that might join your efforts?
Yeah, we know that there's more than a dozen that want to join our efforts. So I think we're going to, the middle, and I guess the bigger point is I actually think this election.
So will the Problem Solvers Caucus be bigger than the House Freedom Caucus?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh,
yes.
Okay.
And by the way, divided government, if you saw in past years, actually divided government, you've gotten a lot out of divided government. Remember in the Clinton era, we had a lot of progress.
I think you remember the Clinton era very well. You were there, right?
I do.
What years were you there?
We got a lot done, the last 3.
Well, right, because you were willing to work with Gingrich, right?
You've got to work with that, but that's the point. We've got to accept solutions that are 80%, not insist on everything. And if either side just focuses on obstructing instead of getting things done, then that's not what the American people want. They want us to actually get things done for them.
All right, Josh Gottheimer, it's great to see you.
Good to see you, Dana. Thanks for having me.
Congratulations on your re-election.
Thank you.
And a Fox News alert on Northern California's Camp Fire, the deadliest wildfire this state has ever seen. 63 people have died, 631 others are reported missing, and 52,000 people are displaced. Claudia Cowan is live in Paradise, California. Claudia, why are so many people now reported missing? There was that big jump in the number overnight.
Yeah.
Require schools to investigate an allegation only if it was reported to certain campus officials. It also requires that the alleged incident must occur on campus or other areas overseen by the school. Finally, the regulations would prohibit students from confronting each other and instead allow cross-examination from a third party, such as an attorney. A major recall after salmonella cases appear in 35 states. We'll tell you what is linked to the outbreak. Plus, calls for justice after a security guard is shot dead by police while he was detaining a shooting suspect. I'll talk to Tyrus about that next. Chicago area security guard killed by a police officer. Jamel Roberson was shot dead by a police officer responding to a report of shots fired at a bar where Roberson was working. At the time of the shooting, Roberson had his gun drawn and was holding down a suspect in the shooting. One dispute centers on whether Roberson was wearing clothing identifying himself as security.
This young man has a 9-month son. He'll never see his child grow up. This young man wanted to be a police. This young man was a child of God. He worked in the church. And he lost his life, unfortunately. So we want justice.
Illinois State Police investigating the case, saying the officer encountered a subject in plain black clothing with no markings readily identifying him as a security guard. According to witness statements, gave the armed subject multiple verbal commands to drop the gun and get on the ground before ultimately discharging his weapon. I'm joined now by Tyrus. He's a professional wrestler and a Fox News contributor. He was also a bodyguard for rapper Snoop Dogg for several years. And you know security. And when you come on every Friday, we ask you, what story would you like to talk about? And this is one of the ones that you chose, and I'm glad you did.
For two reasons. One, this one really struck close to home. This story breaks my heart. For one, I was a bouncer in a club for many years before I became a bodyguard, and we had many situations like this. Me and my boy, Big Tiny, Big Keys, what's up, fellas? There was many nights where we held guys down with weapons, and we waited for the sheriffs to come. But and usually when they got there, it was they ascertained the situation, they talked to witnesses, then they made their move, and typically it was just a lot of times it was just a handoff. Like, I'm holding the guy down, the officer would, I got him, young man, and then they'll pull him off.
You step away.
Great job by the sheriffs because they knew the area and they knew the people. My issue with this is, first of all, this young man who's a good guy with a gun. This is what those of us who support the Second Amendment, who support this is what we're talking about. He did his job better than the police officer did. He took down an armed man without firing his weapon, subdued him, kept the crowd safe, probably saved life. So, number one, he's a hero. Now, if there's some information we don't know about at this point, but I'm just going off of what we know now, and every case is different. The crowd was there. They're surrounding him, which means they were not in fear of their life, because if someone pulls a gun in the club, everybody runs.
Right.
So my issue, and if the worst case scenario, I'm just get it out there because this is what the first thing everyone wants to say, he was shot while being black. That's the worst case scenario.
Yeah.
My issue is I'm more concerned about the training. Whatever happened to Freeze, whatever happened to investigating. If he wasn't sure, call for backup. There was a million things going to happen. This young man's dream was to be a police officer. He died, in my opinion, he died in the line of duty. It shouldn't, this should not happen. It did happen, so we have to learn from it. But being a police officer is a thankless job. It takes a special man and woman of tremendous character and resolve to be a police officer.
And commitment.
My question is, what is the training now? Is the training now better to be judged by 12 than carried by 6? Is it fear? I don't see anymore the investigating. I don't see any more knowing the communities, because we don't have cops that walk the streets anymore that know the areas. Like, he showed up, there's a crowd of brothers and sisters screaming at him saying that this guy's a security guard. He was dressed in black, which is typically what we wear when we bounce clubs. He did have a hat on that said security. People were yelling at him. If anything, don't pull that gun, find out. I get it's a split-second decision, but this just off principle looks like a horrible decision. The police chief called it an accidental tragedy or whatever, but I feel like it's an accidental murder. This young man, it breaks my heart. And I also feel bad.